Welcome to the Taylor Made Tasty podcast. I'm Taylor, retired serial quitter turned goal boss coach, speaker, and consultant. I believe a beautiful life starts with a beautiful mindset. Join me as we amplify confidence, resilience, and actionable tools on the road to quit quitting on you and your vision. You are worthy of your goals, so let's go get there. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Taylor Made Tasty, the podcast. Today's episode features a guest by the name of Julie Lamb, and we will be discussing 3 ways to overcome imposter syndrome. This episode focuses on understanding what causes imposter syndrome and things we can do right now to overcome it. We will dive into some causes and signs to look out for, along with actions towards elevating your self-esteem. A little bit about our guest. For almost 20 years, Julie Lamb has helped hundreds of clients overcome the mental and emotional roadblocks holding back their success. A licensed therapist and successful coaching business owner, she has empowered Fortune 500 executives and million-dollar business owners to unlock new levels of success, work-life balance, and mental resilience through proven science-based coaching services, utilizing tools from both disciplines of clinical therapy and business coaching in a results-focused framework. Her clients achieve progress at an accelerated pace. Please help me in welcoming Julie to the show, and let's get into it.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Can you believe it's time for the annual Vision Board Party? It's back, Saturday, December 3rd. This Vision Board Party offers an empowering and imaginative goal-setting session where participants will learn the fundamentals of creating a vision board, but more importantly, break down big goals into attainable milestones for the coming year. The first part of the workshop consists of guided meditation, reflection, and journaling designed to open up the mind before we jump into action. The second half is dedicated to building the vision, where participants will transfer their goals into milestones with deadlines and ultimately into a graphic representation of their big dreams. You can find more information at tailormadetasty.com/vision board. And for all my podcast listeners, use code PODCAST for 10% off any package. Let's go get there in 2023.
3, 2, 1.
Hi, Julie. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Taylor. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Okay. So I personally appreciate this topic because it has become more prevalent, I think. Maybe because all of us at some point are like dealing with certain levels of self-doubt regularly. And sometimes we don't know how to identify the exact feeling we're having and have this like false belief that we are not as capable or confident than people perceive us to be, right? And so in the simplest form, can you explain imposter syndrome so that listeners can identify if that is what they may be feeling?
Okay. The best way to look at it is imposter syndrome is when you minimize your accomplishments and maximize your doubts.
Yes. Okay. So we are minimizing everything that we are good at or have built in our life, have grown to be, and then we are, what did you say? Maximizing?
Yeah, you maximize your doubts. It's a lot of times we just feel like we are inadequate or incompetent, despite the fact that we've accomplished so many things. And so I always look at imposter syndrome and just say, we just essentially are minimizing ourselves and maximizing all the things that we don't like about ourselves or that we're afraid of, and all those doubts.
Yeah. And when you put it that way, it's like, why would we ever want to feel that way? Gross. Okay. So even with the thoughts surrounding, let's say like my small business, I've been in business since 2020. started right before all the craziness happened. But I've felt some sort of like imposter syndrome, and because of that, have done like my fair share of reading and research on papers and journals and stuff on the topic, right? And what I found to be true is that many deal with this. However, it's like seems as though high achievers or people that want more out of life, if you will, or want the big dreams and the big goals are more likely to experience it because we're like constantly wanting more and looking for the growth and looking for that next level. What are some of the like causes or like some signs to look out for, I guess you could say?
You actually hit it right on the head. And the biggest thing is that we're just going to put women in this category because even though men also struggle with this, to be real, we as women create these standards for ourselves. We create this idea that we are expected to do, show up, be, whatever may happen. And so we compare ourselves. That's one of the, I'm going to say, causes or signs that you can look at is there's this comparison. We compare ourselves to other women. We compare ourselves to men. We compare ourselves to just everybody, And so what happens with this comparison is that we will always look for ways that we fall short. We will look for ways that we don't measure up or how we need to be better. And we even say things like, oh, I just need to be better, as if that's a good thing. And so then that becomes kind of I'm not doing enough. I'm not good enough. I need to be better. And that's one of those causes that comes from this comparison. Something else that happens a lot, like you mentioned high achievers, and many of the women I work with are executives, business owners. They are, in all honesty, you would say they are there, they're at the top. But all that they can feel a lot is that, did they let somebody down along the way? Are they actually doing what they're supposed to? And is this, am I doing it good? Or, all those thoughts and questions come up. And how we can see it is that oftentimes in their work, they feel like they're hustling all the time. They feel like they're staying late all the time, or they are working. Again, it's all the time. We're not able to separate. And so what we end up happening is we burn out. We're tired. There's a lot of stress. So then we procrastinate and we just feel like, I just don't want to do it anymore. And all of those create this idea that it's just too heavy. It's too much. I must not be good at what I'm actually doing. I need to go do something different. And then imposter syndrome has reared its ugly head over and over again.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from that is that a lot of the time we are not considering all the facts, right? And so
Absolutely.
I love how you brought up that you do work with, as you put it, women who are there, right? Women that in our lives that we may see as like, oh, they've made it, like they are already there, where they're still struggling with the same thoughts that we're having at the place that we're maybe pursuing to feel, quote unquote, we're already there. And I would even argue the fact that even when you get there, you still don't think that you're there. Right? But yes, just considering all the facts. So when we're doing that comparison, just as you were saying, minimizing and maximizing, I think when it comes to comparison to, we are doing the exact same thing. We're minimizing the good and maximizing whatever it is about that other person that we either find to be motivating or inspirational, or we are even to the point of like envy or jealousy, right, of whatever it is that that person has when we're looking at that comparison. So we're doing the same thing and getting sort of that same result, is like we feel that comparison, and then that manifests into that imposter syndrome. So it's very interesting how it all just kind of connects and works together in that horrible way.
Yeah.
And what I've come to understand too is that imposter syndrome can come into your lives depending on like certain personality traits or certain circumstances. So I'm sort of wondering if there is a scale for like the depth of imposter syndrome, like the depth that you feel it or it manifests in your life in certain ways, and as if the or if there are different types of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think that I like to look at everything as kind of a spectrum. We all know that somebody can be suffering with one thing that feels like not as heavy as somebody else that may be suffering from it and it's heavier. One of the my years as a therapist have really shown me that you cannot put everybody on the same spectrum, and you can't say that how somebody feels isn't how somebody else feels. So I always put that as my caveat first, because a lot of times we'll say, well, she has no reason to feel that way, like I don't understand that. And or we even look at it and say, I have no reason to feel that way. And to me, that becomes honestly the scale, is when we just look at things in general. Is it okay to feel how we're feeling? And is it okay for her to feel how she's feeling, regardless of the circumstances around us? So that's kind of what I look at, I think, with the scale, because I never want to minimize. However, there are different types of imposter syndrome, and it all comes back to, we're going to call it the personality types. It comes down to, are you a perfectionist? Are you somebody that is always trying to get things, 100%? Are you somebody that has to do it all? Like you don't ever delegate, you don't ever feel like you can trust anybody else to get it done? Or are you somebody that um like you're just really good at what you do, you're a genius at it, you're an expert at it, and you just feel like because you're so good at it, you have to learn more, you have to show more, you have to be more. So there's kind of, to me, it feels like it kind of, if you want to call it a spectrum, but there's those types. The types basically look at somebody and say, um, am I, the high achiever? I have to do it all. I can't let anybody else do it, help me, or I have to continue to prove and show. And so each of those categories sometimes combine to one, and sometimes they will have one category that only fits another one, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And so part of that where you're saying like, oh well, she, we're gonna say she for lack of a different word, but she shouldn't be feeling that way. So when I'm saying, I'm projecting, I guess, that that person shouldn't be feeling that way because of whatever I perceive about them, um, which is interesting because I feel like we can say that imposter syndrome doesn't discriminate. You just mentioned that you work with really high achievers and they're feeling it. And then, our listeners here are going to have a plethora of feelings and they're at all different stages of life. And so that it doesn't discriminate for us to say, well, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Well, she shouldn't be feeling this way, or he shouldn't be feeling this way. It's like we all could be feeling it. And I think that there's some beauty and sort of a baseline in that is like we're not, we can have, and we're going to talk about tools to overcome it, but that at some point, whether someone is a movie star walking onto a set for the 40th time and has done this so many times before, they may feel it just as we do walking into our career or walking into a presentation or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think one of the best examples I've read about was honestly Michelle Obama talking about her feeling like an imposter. And I don't know, I look at this and I think, she was the first lady. How in the world could she be experiencing this feeling of imposter syndrome? She's got law degrees, she's got all of these credentials, but she talks about the idea that she never felt like she measured up to other women, other lawyers, or other even I would say Laura Bush, like she didn't feel like she measured up. And she always worried that people would look at her and say, who are you to be there? You just got lucky because you were there, or, you don't belong. And I think that that's the underlying feeling of I don't belong. And if I don't belong, somebody else is going to find out. And when they find out, then the horrible, awful things are going to happen. And so I've got to do everything in my power to show people I either sometimes do belong, or that I will earn my right to be there. And I
Mm-hmm.
think she's just such a powerful example of somebody that, I mean, politics aside, it doesn't matter what you believe or not. Like she honestly is a woman that has created and done a lot of things, and she deserves what she has. But the fact that she feels like she doesn't belong, like that should really wake us all up, that it isn't, there's nothing that stops this syndrome. Essentially, nobody is immune to it, shall I
Right.
say.
Exactly. Which is why we're going to talk about how we can, different ways that we can start to eliminate it or at least be able to work through it, right? Is because we love actionable tools. And while understanding imposter syndrome is important, I want listeners to have ways to overcome these feelings. So, what are 3 ways that you teach to eliminate imposter syndrome?
So I want to first, before I get the 3 tools, one thing I want everybody to recognize is that your imposter syndrome impacts your nervous system. Okay, so the 3 things that I talk about are about essentially creating safety within that nervous system. So if you don't feel like emotionally safe, or if you don't feel like you're rationally able to look at things, then these 3 tools sometimes feel like, oh, it's just one more thing. It's just too hard. So, with that in mind, the first thing I always encourage everybody to do is just be able to recognize that where you're at is fine, and either any one of these will help. And the whole purpose is just to create safety within yourself, within your body, and then you can move forward. So, I always like to first do that. So, as you go through these 3 things, notice what stands out. Like, listen to your body. How does my body feel? Like, how does this resonate with me? So the first one that I always tell people is we first want to find out where it came from. So it's this limiting beliefs, the idea. We want to look at, did somebody say something? Has somebody told me? Maybe it's something that my mom has said before, but essentially look at, where did this belief first come from? So when I was working, several of my clients, they noticed that it came because they have this expectation of being the best on the team, or they have this idea that they had to be perfect at school. And when they noticed that, they could see the patterns. They could see being perfect at school and how that related to them then at work, or the idea of being the best on the team. And so then it became, I had to practice and work hard and all of those aspects. That was really telling. So you kind of want to look and say, where did some of these thoughts come from? What does imposter syndrome look like from that perspective? So with those limiting beliefs, one of the things I also encourage you to look at is all of your accomplishments, little, big, medium size, whatever it may be. So for me, this was looking at things like, well, I graduated from high school, I went to college, I have a master's degree, I'm a therapist, I'm a coach. Like, I looked at all of those things to be able to say, these are my accomplishments with no judgment. No, well, I got a C in calculus at one time. Like, none of that matters. It truly is, what have I accomplished? What have I done? When you take that, the next part is that you really want to start looking at, is it okay that it's B work? Does it have to be perfect? I think that's really kind of crucial, because when we can look at that, that builds our self-confidence. It's being able to say, you know what, look, I passed this. I got a B, I got a C, I passed it. I did really good, and that's okay. And I think that second step of building this confidence goes along with this idea that I don't have to be perfect. I can just move along. I can feel safe with who I am. I can feel safe with everything I'm doing, and that's okay. The third step that I have people do is setting boundaries. And the boundaries one is honestly the hardest part. Because if you're one of those that naturally is a like hustler, I have to do it all, I can't delegate, then by setting a boundary is being able to say, I can't do it all and I need help. Or also being able to say, I keep comparing myself to these people on Instagram or these other programs, and I need to be able to say, I'm going to stop following them. I'm going to stop looking at them. And that's a boundary that you set to protect your own beliefs, your own system. So those are 3 things. Look at where it came from, be willing to be confident in your own abilities, and then also be willing to set the boundaries to where it may come from or be building from.
Mm-hmm. I really like the B work because that's so true. I mean, I think even growing up, you're like, the goal is always straight A's, like someone just pulled that out of a hat, right? Because does it does it matter in elementary school and even probably up to middle school? Does that really even matter, right? But does that B work, when you're talking about that, is that quote unquote good enough? Then sometimes that's what like can push you through, is that I don't have to be whatever my version of great or perfect at this thing, that my B work is acceptable and I can just move on to the next goal or thing or whatever it is that's gonna push me through this imposter syndrome. So I really like that one. Yeah. And I like to acknowledge that imposter syndrome doesn't have to hold us back from embracing who we are, right? We were talking about the belonging piece, and that's a big part of it. And for people to be seen and to be heard, and creating that in our own lives, right? And acknowledging our own accomplishments, being able to acknowledge our own accomplishments. And while cultivating self-acceptance takes practice, it's a key component of establishing a strong sense of self-assurance and self-esteem. I like to also take everything that and the knowledge that we talked about today and sort of break that down into, if we were to recommend like one simple action towards elevating our self-esteem, what would that be?
My favorite thing to tell people is stop being mean to yourself. So we can
Yes.
call it like we want, stop being, a bee, we, swearing at each other, whatever. All I'm saying, you are your own worst critic, and you are actually more amazing than you give yourself credit for. So I tell everybody, look at yourself, be willing to look at yourself in the mirror to say, I'm amazing. I've accomplished many things. I will screw up many things, but I'm okay right where I'm at, right who I am. And that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
If we can start telling ourselves those things from the get-go, you will then raise up each day to be able to say, how do I live in a way that honors that? That honors that I'm doing enough. I'm okay. And if I'm okay now and I screw up later, that's okay. It doesn't mean that everything's ending, everything's bad. It just means I messed up and it's okay.
Yeah. This thing between our ears is very dramatic sometimes.
Yes.
So and I like that. It is kind of that school kid bully who just needs to stop being mean. So
Mhm.
I really like that. Well, I appreciate everything that you brought to us today, and I would love for our listeners to connect with you and your business, or just you, if you can explain how to connect with you.
Okay, love it. So you can find me at Julie Lamb Coaching on Facebook, Instagram, or my website is julielambcoaching.com. I also have a sign up that gives these 3 steps for imposter syndrome that people can sign up so they can have it. It's got some great journal questions for you to go deeper in those areas. And you can find that on I think we'll have the link as well here. So you can go ahead and you can get that for yourself too.
Thank you so much, Julie. So, helping us overcome imposter syndrome today. I know this is a starting point, right? We're talking about a very big deal here, very big thoughts that we're having, very big feelings that we're having. So, we're not going to just wave a magic wand and be done with it. But this is a great starting point, especially your 3 ways to eliminate it. So I thank you for being here today and appreciate all your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
All right, y'all, it is time for the quote of the episode. This quote is from Louise Hay. You've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. Take that into your week, your month, maybe even your year, and overcome your imposter syndrome by maximizing your greatest attributes. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for being in my community. I'm so glad you showed up today, and let's go get there. Look at you, crushing it. thank you for joining me for another episode of the Tailor Made Tasty podcast. My hope is you always leave with a takeaway to implement in your own goal-crushing journey. I would love if you could take a moment to leave a review. And if you're looking for a community of goal boss badasses just like you, be sure to check out tailormadetasty.com/membership.